My name is Charlie Leadbeater, and I am the author of a book called We Think, which is about the way the web is changing how we come up with ideas together, and also a report called Cloud Culture, which is about how the advent of cloud computing might change our culture.
Yeah, and you were participating here in the Culturemondo roundtable about cloud culture and new business models, and you were opening your speech by mentioning a civil war during a meeting. It was quite a concrete example. Could you just tell us a little bit more? What was the civil war about?
Lots of cultural organisations have this pull. They know how to do some things well. They know those activities are in decline, whether it's publishing or broadcasting or museums, but at least they know how to do them. And on the other side, there are these other things they might do with the web which are fast growing and exciting, but no one quite knows how to make any money out of them. And so most organisations, you witness this kind of pull. And so in one media company I went to give a talk to, someone from the new media side, in the game side, said all media is better if it's participative, it's interactive, all media experiences are improved by being interactive. And then people on the TV side saying, no, that's not true, because actually people like narratives, they like to be told stories, it doesn't have to be interactive. And anyway, we still make the lion's share of the money. You might get lots of activity, but you don't make any money. And so there's this sort of, they almost had a fight. They were, if there had been bread rolls, they would have started throwing them at one another. And the tension is then replayed into the executives who have to decide what to invest in. Do we invest in this stuff which seems to be growing fast and lots of activity but no business models, or do we invest in this stuff where there's a business model but it's declining? One of the kind of big things about the way that the web is changing what we do is that increasingly people will find that they talk but no one engages. So politicians talk but they don't really engage. French wine talks but no one really engages, because French wine talks to people in a language that it decides and is very difficult to decipher, and most people don't understand, but that's the language it uses, and it has expected people to come to it and adopt its language. Australian wine adopts a much more user-friendly language. It's very simple, it's Chardonnay, it's branded like Cloudy Bay, it's very easy to understand what you might drink and eat together. It's aimed at kind of the experience of the consumer. Australian wine's much more accessible, it talks and people engage. And French wine has found itself hugely disrupted by the arrival of these new ways of talking about wine. And that's happening all over the place. Basically, French wine is like a detached, high-quality elite which talks its own language but no one engages anymore. Australian wine is like a sort of slightly barbaric populist elite which talks a language that's much, much easier for people to pick up and use.
And you used another grid to illustrate the relation between investment and impact of the investment. Could you just...
So in culture particularly, we're used to over the last decade, I suppose, particularly, high investment having high impact. So you create a new Guggenheim in Bilbao, or you build a new museum in Valencia or whatever, and these big investments have a big impact in terms of rebranding, repositioning a city. And they still can, and actually the benefits of the Guggenheim investment are still playing out in Bilbao. But what we also now know is that physical regeneration in and of itself doesn't lead to cultural regeneration, and that there are also ways to have a big impact with small investments. So the web creates ways for people to create things at low cost together without huge, great investments in infrastructure. So many of the big communities and activities that have grown on the web, whether it's around YouTube or Facebook or mothers networks like Mumsnet in the UK, which has 600,000 mothers, and they're generally small upfront investments for big engagement and big impact. And that is really where culture will need to be in future. If there's less money around, you'll have to spend it in a way, a sort of catalytic way, which will create a big...
Being a cultural operator, could I use these grids, for instance, or these reflections to develop for me or find for me a business model, or at least another way to do what I'm doing, to run my business?
I don't think they'll create new business models for you, but they'll make it clearer where you might be and where you need to be. And so basically, culture in future will have to be much more high engagement, high participation. It will have to do that with less money, and it will have to engage many people in creating many things, rather than just being about a few people creating a few things for one another. And so those are the kind of models that will really excite people in the future. And that will take radical thinking about business models. It will take radical thinking about how to reach the people you need to reach, and engage them in ways that are really kind of compelling.
Yeah, on the other side you mentioned cloud capitalists. How do they fit into this? So when I try to do my,
so I think
sort my way out, and then you're dealing
so
with these
I
cloud
think that
capitalists.
we're gradually sort of moving into a kind of world in which people like Apple and Facebook and Amazon and Google, YouTube, Twitter will have sort of floating clouds of content and information and software which we'll pull down to our many devices, and that will give them, they will make available to us untold riches, I think, of culture and creativity. I mean, if you just look at what Google is doing with books, it's absolutely amazing. But as a result of that, Google will also acquire enormous power and prestige over books. And so the cloud capitalists, by finding ways to sort of make available to us all this stuff, will both give us lots of opportunity, pleasure, but also potentially bring it back to them, control.